Okay, and so now this video is going to be showing you how to archive your pieces for when you no longer have access to LexFil's Pro account, or for any other reason that you would want to save your pieces. Let's say you finish them and you want to have access to all of those files or stems, and be able to open up in your own DAW or into create your own Soundtrap with project on a different account. Then this is how you're going to do that. And there's a couple of different ways and a couple different use case scenarios that I will explain. So right here you can see I'm on the main project page, and let's go to my pieces and examples that I've made. Okay, now let's say you just want to download an MP3 of it. You don't want to keep editing the piece. You don't think you're going to need to change anything about it or revisit it really in any way. And you just want to have your song so that you can just listen to it wherever as a file. To do that, you are going to go right here to these three dots, click that, and you are going to do download, and you have a couple of options. MP3 is going to be kind of the standard one, and the smallest amount of size. It will sound fine. Your other two options are going to be lossless types of formats. Basically what that means is that it's not compressed to save as much space, and so it takes up more space and therefore is more high fidelity. The Wave one is the standard lossless one that I would download if you want to use that. If you aren't worried about running out of space on your computer or your phone, I would usually download a copy of the WAV file just to keep it as your like master copy. But in terms of with the MP3s, modern MP3 technology sounds great and is easily sent to friends and family and things like that over text messages or emails and stuff like that because it's smaller. So you could also just download both. But you're just going to download MP3, and then right here, also I'm using Google Chrome. And right here's our downloads, and here you go. It will just go into your download folder. And that's how I would do that with all of my pieces, just to save them the full piece. Now, if you plan on editing this piece more later on, then there's a couple of other things you're going to want to do, and that's going to be actually going into the project itself. Now, when we are inside of our project, if we go over here, we can export all of it. If you go up here to File, go down to Export, you can export the MIDI tracks to a file. And so what that's going to do is it's going to take every single one of these that is MIDI. So this will only work with MIDI if it's an audio track. It's not going to export MIDI. It has to be a MIDI track, but it will export all of your MIDI tracks to a file in your downloads, and you can then put that into a different digital audio workstation. The other thing too that we've talked about is Flat.io and Noteflight, those in-browser notation programs. This will seamlessly integrate it with that. You just have to be logged into those on the same browser, and it'll open up that and import it, and you can edit this as notation. Now, the one other thing, let's see, is if I want to do let's say I have an audio track. So let's go to this project here. So this one, you can see a lot of audio tracks, a lot of MIDI tracks. Let's say I want to specifically get this track. Now, you're going to go here on the actual dots of this track and export it as WAV. And you have two options, WAV with no effects or just the regular WAV. And again, that's just talking about, you know, the effects that you added right here on this track. If you like your effects and don't think you're ever going to want to change them, go for that. If you want to kind of start with a clean slate and like a bigger digital audio workstation and use those effects, go for that. You could also do both. The let's see, and when doing MIDI, you can also export MIDI as a wave audio file. So see this MIDI track here? If I click those same three dots, I can export this as a MIDI file, just like we exported all of our MIDI files, but I could also have Soundtrap convert that MIDI file into a wave audio file. And what you would do in that case, that would be like, let's say you don't want to keep editing the notes necessarily, you just want to maybe mess with the volume and the fade and stuff like that between the different tracks and mix it all. But all of the composition, all of the notes and chords you picked, those are good and you don't want to mess with those. That's when I would do this wave audio file one. So when you are sending these out, you sometimes will want to work with things in terms of groups. So let's say you have a bunch of different drum tracks. I'm not doing drums in this piece. I'm doing kind of weird found sound effects, this 8mm film projector sound. So like, let's see right here. Okay, so let's say that I want to just have right here, all three of these tracks are using similar, they're very similar sounding. You can kind of think of them as just a group, and these are the subsections of that group. So let's say that I want to minimize how many things I have to work with and not with, I don't know how many are here, like 20 different tracks. And I just want to have, for instance, like my drum track, my guitar track, and not have my drums be like kick, snare, hi-hat, that kind of thing, all the different miking situations or instruments that you use to kind of make that hyper instrument. So to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to go up to here in, let's see, right here, settings, merge tracks. Now when I click that, it's going to let me basically toggle all of the different tracks that I think could be summed up into one track. And I'm going to take those three that I was just listening to and hit merge. You're going to have to let it load for a second. And now you can see that all those tracks are now called the merged 8mm film. And I think it actually puts all of the names in there. So it's going to be kind of very long. But right here, all of that stuff that we just heard is now its own track. And so I can go through and do that with all of these and kind of clean up and minimize how much I'm really working with. So like, again, down here, if I like the way these three sound together, and I think that these all sound perfectly fine together and don't need to be edited further, and it's actually this big track group with this track group that needs to be kind of messed with in terms of its volume relative levels with one another, then I could also merge these ones as well and then just export 2 tracks instead of 6 and then mess with those 2 tracks later. And that's a really handy way of minimizing how many tracks you have to deal with when you're mixing or archiving. It'll save you space. Just kind of simplifies the whole process. The only thing is you can see that those other tracks, they did disappear when I did that. So it's destructive, right? You aren't going to have the option to like open that up and unfold it and get the other ones back and re-edit it. It's a permanent change. Now, that being said, if you're still working in that file, you can just undo it if you actually decide you didn't like doing that. So I could undo that merge. Gonna have to do it a couple times because of all the, there we go. And so now I have it back. But, you know, you want to, before you close the session, save and be done for the day kind of thing, you want to make sure that these are decisions that you aren't making lightly. And yeah, again, the same thing here. Let's redo that merge real quick, and I'll just demonstrate how to now put all of this into a different digital audio workstation so that you can keep making projects, working on your project, I mean. So let's say I won't do all of them just for the sake of time, but actually, you know what? Maybe I will. Okay, just show you the whole process. So to make this easier on myself, right now I have this one muted, so I don't really need to worry about that one. I'll put that at the top just so I don't have to kind of worry about that one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all of my audio ones next to each other, because I'm going to have to export those and kind of manually clean them up by merging tracks, right? And then I'm going to keep all of the MIDI ones. They can kind of be where they can all be down here, and that one's going to be easy because I'll just export all of them at once as MIDI using this big menu command here. So let's see, I think this is my last audio track, right? Yeah, everything down here is MIDI. So we're going to bounce, export MIDI tracks to file. I have those. Again, when you open these, you're gonna actually have just one file. It's just gonna be a bigger file, you can see, as it was compared to when I just did one track. And when you, I'll show you how that works, but basically when you bounce it, pull it into a digital audio workstation, it'll ask you what you want to do with all those tracks, because it'll recognize that there's multiple tracks in there. So now we just kind of need to worry about these ones. I already summed that one, so we'll have that one be its own thing. Let's listen to, let's see this. Oops. Back. Okay. Also, you can tell I'm making some strange music. There's some screaming and stuff involved. I'm kind of trying to see how far I can go with electroacoustic sounds in Soundtrap. This piece isn't really done, but okay, so what I'm going to kind of separate it like this. We have some longer sounds here, right? And then a bunch of shorter sounds here that aren't really getting too in each other's way. Okay, so I'm going to export these four as one, as a bunch of short sounds. I'm kind of viewing this almost like my melody, and then this is my harmony backing stuff, these two longer ones. And then all of these ones can kind of be exported, again, just as MIDI. So let's merge those two real quick. So dog and sound effects, merge them. Again, that's now all there. And then one more with those other four. Let's see. Oh, and here, this is what I was talking about in terms of the name, merge sound effects, flashback, dog barking. It puts all of the names in, so that makes it really clear. Even though it becomes very long, it makes it very clear what you are looking at. Let's do, oh, and this one was actually already merged when I did at some other point, forgot about it. Okay, there. And now we only have to export these 3 audio files. So that's a lot easier to do and keep track of. So we're going to export as WAV. It'll automatically be sent to the download. Export this one as WAV. And then export this one as WAV. And let's see. Explorer, that's that one. Joey. Oh, I exported the same one twice. I did this one twice. Let's do this real quick. There we go. And now that we have our audio files, time to do the MIDI ones. Right here, export MIDI tracks to file. I already did that, but just again, showing you how it's done. Okay, so now our part with Soundtrap is basically done. So I am now going to open my digital audio workstation, Reaper. This might be slightly different depending on what digital audio workstation you are working with. Most of them are pretty similar. Most of them will have a drag and drop ability that I'll show you in a second, but you can also do it using a menu command. Right now it's just taking a little bit because I have a lot of plugins going on in Reaper. Okay, so now let's make a new project. And no, I didn't do anything to that, so let's not save that. Okay, so now when it comes to adding these in, I could just go to my downloads folder right here, and I'm going to sort by date added. So here's all that new stuff that we just did. Here, let's make that all one folder just to make that easy. New folder selection, and rename that as, what did I call this piece? Experimenting with samples. So and then we will just use it here. And so here is what I was talking about with drag and drop potential, is I'm going to take this MIDI file. This is the big one that has all of them. Again, we accidentally duplicated it, so we don't need that. And then just drag this whole thing in. And now mine pulls up, my DAW Reaper pulls up a prompt if I want to expand 7 MIDI tracks to new Reaper tracks. So again, this is basically asking me if I want 1 track or 7 tracks. And since I had 7 different instruments, I'm going to hit OK. And there we go. And look, it even has our names. They're all lined up nice. And I'm now just going to move these forward. And here is all of the MIDI stuff that we were using. Now, the only thing that we have to do now that's somewhat inconvenient is assign instruments. So in Reaper, the way that I would do that is going to effects and picking a synth, some other kind of MIDI instrument to then play those sounds. So let's do just the really simple one, Ria synth. Right, and so now this is the 8mm effects. So this one a second ago was actually one, looks like this track. Now, it sounds nothing like it, right? And the reason why is because this piece right here, this track, is using a sampling instrument of film projector sounds. So if I wanted to actually get that exact same sound in here but still be able to edit it in Reaper, I'm going to need to get this sound and then put it into my own sampler. Now, to actually get that sound, I could just find what it's based off of. So like I could go up here into these one shots and look up 8mm effects, searching free sound. Let's see, 8mm projector, that might be it. Loop not loading. What about this one? Ooh. Well, it's not loading right now for some reason. I've actually never had this happen in Soundtrap, but this is what I would do, is I would basically take this, add this as a sample, not in the sampler, but just a new track. So I just have one, got it. Yeah, again, not loading, but I would add that one, have that small little WAV file, export that as the audio, bring that then into Reaper, and use a sampler in Reaper and use that as the sound source. That's a pretty complicated way of doing it. Honestly, if I have a really complicated thing like this sample audio, I would probably just render this again as a WAV audio file and bring that WAV audio file in so that it sounds like that, what I want it to sound like. Let's say, for instance, an easier thing might be xylophone, right? So a xylophone right here, I could just replace it with a xylophone MIDI instrument, and maybe a nicer one even than what's in Soundtrap, and that would be a lot easier. Let's see. Yeah. So with those longer ones, it sounds a little weird, but here in this shorter section that is supposed to be more like xylophone sounds, that sounds pretty good. And there we go. But it's going to be kind of different with each use case scenario. I would really only be doing this if I felt like I had better instruments, like versions of the same instruments that I was using in Soundtrap. And then you would have to go and do that with all of them. And then to, again, show you how to do the audio ones, similar thing. You're just going to drag those on. It's going to make a new track. Melodic writing. There you go. The other way you could do this is, instead of dragging them in, you could do file. What is that? 36.9. And time base, I want also to be showing minutes and seconds. Yeah, so that's not doing that the way we would like to have it done. So you can see this problem. So what you're going to want to do in that case is just have to check where your files start. Ideally, DAWs will let you render it as a stem and not as a media item. And what that does is it's the whole track, not just this media item. And that would keep the 36.9 seconds of silence baked into that then exported item that you have. So we would just want to make it start at the same time. So we're going to go for 36.9. So right in front of 37. And then I'm just going to drag that to then start there. And you'll kind of just have to do that to get that working. And have them line up in the right spots, which is another reason why minimizing how many of these you have is going to be nice. That's what you'd have to do with the audio ones. If you notice, Soundtrap is exporting the MIDI ones correctly and baking in that silence into the front of the track. So like this right here, Airplane Flyby, doesn't start until quite a bit into the piece. And when we go and check its track in Reaper, same thing. We don't have any audio until all the way over here. Oh, the one other thing is to make sure that you have it now also going at the same tempo. When I dragged it in originally, I think some of you may have noticed that I actually asked me that option to have the tempo from the file, because a lot of MIDI files bake the tempo into it, change the tempo of the project. I should have done that. Now I'm gonna have to go back and do it. I might make an actual video explaining how to do that later, but I don't really feel like doing it. I'm just focused on this is how you get your stuff into Soundtrap. Again, if you don't want to mess with all of it as MIDI too, you can just do all of these projects as audio and kind of sum it up so you only have 4 or 5, and that's going to make that process a lot easier. So I only have Reaper and Logic, so I could do also a Logic one if somebody really needs it. You can comment, request it or something, but for your other ones, that's where you're gonna have to do a little bit of troubleshooting or ask me in class. Okay, and that's how to archive your Soundtrap projects. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.